Close your eyes and let yourself drift back through time, back more than 3,000 years, to a world of sun-bleached marble and endless blue seas. We're traveling to ancient Greece, a civilization that would shape the world in ways both profound and beautiful. Our journey begins around 3000 BCE on the island of Crete, where the Minoan civilization first flourished. The Minoans weren't Greek themselves, but they laid the foundation for what would come. Picture their magnificent palace at Knossos, with its labyrinthine corridors and vibrant frescoes showing dolphins leaping through azure waters. These peaceful people, with their advanced plumbing systems and colorful art, thrived for over 1,000 years before mysteriously declining around 1450 BCE. As the Minoans faded, the Mycenaeans rose on mainland Greece. These were warriors and traders, building their fortress cities on hilltops. Around 1600 to 1100 BCE, they dominated the Aegean world. The massive stone walls of Mycenae still stand today, built with blocks so enormous that later Greeks believed only the Cyclopes, those mythical one-eyed giants, could have lifted them into place. Then came darkness. Around 1100 BCE, the Bronze Age collapsed across the Mediterranean. For roughly 3 centuries, Greece entered what historians call the Dark Ages. Writing disappeared. Grand palaces crumbled. Trade networks fell silent. Yet in this darkness, seeds were being planted. People forgot how to write. Yes, but they didn't forget how to tell stories. And those stories, of heroes and gods, of the Trojan War and Odysseus' long journey home, will be passed down through generations until they could finally be written again. When Greece emerged from this darkness around 800 BCE, something remarkable had happened. Instead of one unified kingdom, hundreds of independent city-states have formed, each one a world unto itself. These city-states, called polis in Greek, were more than just cities. Each was a complete political entity with its own government, its own army, its own identity. A person wasn't simply Greek. They were Athenian or Spartan or Theban first. And it was during this archaic period, around 776 BCE, that the Greeks began holding the Olympic Games. Every 4 years, athletes from across the Greek world would gather at Olympia to compete in honor of Zeus. Wars would pause. Conflicts would cease. For those sacred days, only the games mattered. Young men would race, wrestle, box, and throw the discus, crowned with nothing more than olive wreaths if they won. But those wreaths brought glory that lasted lifetimes. The Greeks also rediscovered writing during this time, but with a crucial difference. They adopted the Phoenician alphabet, but made it their own by adding vowels, something the Phoenician script lacked. This seemingly small innovation made reading and writing dramatically more accessible. Knowledge could spread more easily. Ideas could be preserved with greater precision. Democracy itself, when it eventually emerged, would depend on a literate citizenry. Speaking of democracy, let's rest our minds for a moment in ancient Athens, around 508 BCE. A reformer named Cleisthenes had just introduced a radical new system of government. For the first time in recorded history, ordinary citizens would vote directly on laws and policies. Not everyone could participate. Women, foreigners, and enslaved people were excluded. But for free male citizens, this was revolutionary. The word democracy itself comes from Greek, demos meaning people and kratos meaning power. Power to the people. As you breathe slowly and deeply, imagine the Athenian assembly gathered on the Pnyx, a hill overlooking their city. 6,000 citizens might gather here to debate and vote. Anyone could speak. Anyone could propose a law. This was direct democracy, not representatives, but the people themselves making decisions that would shape their world. Let these images wash over you now. The ancient Aegean glittering in sunlight, the ruins of Knossos with their crimson columns, the mighty walls of Mycenae, athletes racing at Olympia, citizens debating on the Pnyx. Rest easy, knowing that this is just the beginning of our journey through Greek civilization. There is so much more to discover. But for now, simply let yourself drift on these gentle waves of history. As we drift deeper into the world of ancient Greece, let's turn our attention to gods who live in their imagination and on a mountain called Olympus. The Greeks believed in 12 major gods and goddesses who rule from the sacred peak, the highest mountain in all of Greece. Zeus, the king of the gods, wielded thunderbolts and governed the sky. His wife Hera protected marriage. Poseidon commanded the seas with his trident. Athena embodied wisdom and warfare. Apollo brought light, music, and prophecy. And there were others: Artemis, Ares, Aphrodite, Hephaestus, Hermes, Demeter, and Dionysus. Each god had their own personality, their own flaws, their own stories. They weren't distant or perfect. They quarreled, fell in love, felt jealousy. They were, in many ways, like humans with extraordinary power. These gods needed homes among mortals. And so the Greeks built temples. Imagine the Parthenon, constructed between 447 and 432 BCE on the Athenian Acropolis. This wasn't merely a building. It was a masterpiece of mathematical precision and optical illusion. The columns appear perfectly straight, but they actually curve slightly inward. The platform seems level, but it actually rises gently in the center. These subtle adjustments, made by architect Ictinos and Callicrates under the sculptor Phidias, corrected for the way human eyes perceive shapes and distances. The result was perfection made visible in marble. But let's travel now from Athens to its great rival, Sparta. While Athenians debated in assemblies and sculpted marble, Spartans trained for war. From age 7, Spartan boys left their families to begin the Agoge, a brutal military training system that lasted until age 30. They learned to endure pain, survive with little food, fight with discipline and courage. Spartan warriors were the most feared soldiers in all of Greece, and their entire society was organized around creating them. Even Spartan women, unlike most Greek women, received physical training and owned property because Sparta needed them strong to raise strong sons. These two powers, Athens with its democracy and culture, Sparta with its discipline and military might, would inevitably clash. The Persian Wars came first, uniting them against a common enemy. In 490 BCE, King Darius of Persia sent a massive invasion force across the Aegean. They landed at Marathon, a coastal plain northeast of Athens. The Athenians, though vastly outnumbered, charged the Persian lines in one of history's most daring tactical decisions. Against all odds, they won. A messenger named Phidippides ran the roughly 26 miles from Marathon to Athens to announce the victory, then collapsed and died, giving us the origin of the modern marathon race. 10 years later, in 480 BCE, Darius' son Xerxes returned with an even larger force. This time, the Greeks faced millions, or so the ancient historian Herodotus claimed, though modern scholars think the number was more likely in the hundreds of thousands. At a narrow pass called Thermopylae, 300 Spartan warriors under King Leonidas made their legendary stand. For 3 days they held the pass, until a traitor showed the Persians a mountain path around them. Leonidas, knowing death was certain, sent most of the Greek allies away, but stayed with his 300 Spartans and a few others. They fought to the last man, giving Athens precious time to evacuate. The final victory came at sea. The Athenian leader Themistocles had convinced the city to build a fleet of triremes, sleek warships with 3 rows of oars on each side and bronze rams at their prows. At the Battle of Salamis in 480 BCE, these triremes lured the larger Persian fleet into narrow waters where Persian numbers became a disadvantage. The Greeks rammed and sank ship after ship. Xerxes, watching from a golden throne on shore, saw his navy destroyed and his invasion dreams shattered. After the Persian threat ended, Athens and Sparta eventually turned on each other. The Peloponnesian War, lasting from 431 to 404 BCE, devastated Greece for a generation. Athens relied on its navy and walls. Sparta relied on its army. Year after year they fought, neither able to deliver a knockout blow, until finally Sparta, with Persian gold, built a navy of its own and starred Athens into surrender. Let your mind rest now in the aftermath of these great conflicts, Imagine the quiet returning to the Aegean after decades of war. The waves lapping against triremes pulled up on peaceful shores. The olive groves growing silver in moonlight. Breathe deeply and slowly. In these moments between war and peace, between Athens and Sparta, we'll pause and let history settle gently around you. Let us turn now from warriors and battles to the quiet pursuit of wisdom, to the philosophers who ask questions that still echo through time. In the bustling agora of Athens, the marketplace where citizens gathered to buy fish and olive oil, to gossip and debate, a strange man could often be found. His name was Socrates, and he was born around 470 BCE. He wore simple clothes, walked barefoot, and spent his days asking questions. What is justice? He would ask. What is virtue? What is the good life? But Socrates never claimed to have answers. Instead, he questioned the answers others gave, gently revealing contradictions in their thinking until they realized how little they truly knew. This method, asking questions to expose ignorance and stimulate critical thinking, we still call the Socratic method today. Socrates never wrote anything down himself. Everything we know of him comes from his students, especially one named Plato. Born around 428 BCE into an aristocratic Athenian family, Plato was devastated when his beloved teacher was put on trial in 399 BCE. The charges were corrupting the youth and impiety toward the gods. Found guilty, Socrates was sentenced to death by drinking hemlock, a poison. He could have fled Athens, but he chose to obey the law, even a law he considered unjust. He drank the hemlock calmly, surrounded by his weeping students, and died discussing the immortality of the soul. Plato honored his teacher's memory by founding a school called the Academy around 387 BC, in a grove sacred to hero Academus just outside Athens. This wasn't a school as we might imagine it. There were no classrooms or curricula. Instead, scholars gathered to discuss philosophy, mathematics, and astronomy. The Academy would endure for over 900 years, making it one of the longest-lasting institutions of higher learning in history. Above its entrance, tradition says, were carved the words, "Let no one ignorant of geometry enter." Plato taught that the physical world we perceive is merely a shadow of true reality. Imagine people chained in a cave, he suggested, watching shadows on a wall, believing those shadows are real. We're like those prisoners. True reality consists of perfect, eternal forms or ideas that exist beyond our senses. A beautiful flower is beautiful because it participates in the form of beauty itself. This theory of forms became one of the most influential philosophical concepts ever conceived. Among Plato's students was a young man from northern Greece named Aristotle, born in 384 BCE. While Plato looked to an abstract realm of perfect forms, Aristotle focused on the physical world before him. He collected specimens, classified animals, studied plants, dissected creatures to understand their anatomy. He wrote about everything: politics, ethics, logic, poetry, biology, physics. His works, systematic and encyclopedic, attempted to organize all human knowledge. For nearly 2,000 years after his death, Aristotle's word was considered almost infallible in European thought. When Aristotle was about 40 years old, he received an extraordinary invitation. King Philip II of Macedon asked him to tutor his 13-year-old son, a boy who would grow up to be Alexander the Great. For 3 years, from 343 to 340 BCE, Aristotle taught the young prince, instilling in him a love of Homer's Iliad and Greek culture. Alexander would carry a copy of the Iliad with him throughout his conquests, sleeping with it under his pillow alongside his dagger. Alexander became king at just 20 years old in 336 BCE, after his father Philip was assassinated. Within 13 years, this young king conquered the largest empire the world had yet seen. He defeated the mighty Persian Empire, marched his armies through Egypt, where he was declared a living god, and founded the city of Alexandria. He pushed east through Afghanistan and into India, where his exhausted soldiers finally refused to go farther. By the time of his death at age 32 in 323 BCE, possibly from fever, possibly from poison, Alexander had spread Greek culture across 3 continents. This spreading of Greek culture created what historians call the Hellenistic period. Hellenistic comes from Hellenes, The Greeks named for themselves. Greek became the common language of trade and learning from Egypt to India. Greek styles in art, architecture, and theater influenced countless peoples. New cities were founded on Greek models, with gymnasiums, theaters, and agoras. Greek philosophy blended with Egyptian, Persian, and Indian ideas. The world became more connected, more cosmopolitan, more aware of itself as a single inhabited space. An oikoumene, the Greeks called it a whole inhabited world. Let your mind wander now through this vast Hellenistic world. Picture the great library of Alexandria rising on the Egyptian coast, holding hundreds of thousands of scrolls. Imagine Greek theaters carved into hillside from Sicily to Afghanistan. See the trade routes carrying not just spices and silk, but ideas and stories. Breathe in the wisdom of Socrates. Breathe out the conquest of Alexander. Let the gentle rhythm of history carry you deeper into rest. As you rest comfortably, let us wander now into the realm of stories, the myths and epics that the ancient Greeks told beneath starlit skies and around flickering hearth fires. Long before these stories were written down, they were sung. Traveling poets called rhapsodes would recite epic poems from memory, sometimes for hours, entertaining crowds at festivals and feasts. The greatest of these epics were attributed to a poet named Homer, though whether Homer was one person, many people, or perhaps a tradition rather than an individual, scholars still debate. What matters is the stories themselves. The Iliad and the Odyssey, composed around the 8th century BCE, probably drawing on oral traditions stretching back centuries more. The Iliad tells of the Trojan War, but not the whole 10-year conflict, only a few weeks near its end, focusing on the rage of the hero Achilles. He was the greatest Greek warrior, nearly invincible, except for one vulnerable spot on his heel, where his mother had held him when she dipped him in the river Styx as a baby. When Achilles withdraws from battle after a quarrel with King Agamemnon, the Greeks begin to lose. His dearest friend Patroclus, try and help, borrows Achilles' armor and is killed by the Trojan prince Hector. Mad with grief, Achilles returns to battle, slays Hector, and drags his body around the walls of Troy, an act of rage and dishonor that haunts the poem's ending. The Odyssey follows what happened after Troy fell, telling the adventures of the cunning hero Odysseus as he tries to return home to the island of Ithaca. His journey takes 10 years. He encounters the Cyclops Polyphemus, a one-eyed giant whom Odysseus blinds and escapes by clinging to the belly of a sheep. He resists the enchanting songs of sirens by having his crew tie him to the mast. He loses all his men to various disasters and spends 7 years trapped on the island of the nymph Calypso before finally, with divine help, reaching home. There he finds his faithful wife Penelope still waiting. Though surrounded by suitors who want to marry her and claim his kingdom, these epic poems shaped Greek culture profoundly. Every educated Greek knew them by heart. Children learned to read from them. The values they taught, honor, courage, loyalty, cleverness, became the ideals Greeks aspired to. Even the gods in the poems behaved like Greek aristocrats, with all their virtues and all their flaws magnified to divine proportions. The Greeks also invented theater as we know it. In Athens, during the annual festival of Dionysus, the god of wine and ecstasy, playwrights would compete by presenting their works before thousands of citizens seated in a great semicircular theater carved into the hillside. These weren't casual entertainments. They were civic events, religious ceremonies, and artistic competitions all at once. Tragedy was born here. The word itself comes from tragos, meaning goat, and ode, meaning song, possibly because a goat was sacrificed to Dionysus or given as a prize. The great tragedians, Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, wrote plays that explore profound questions of fate, justice, hubris, and human suffering. Sophocles' Oedipus Rex, written around 429 BCE, told of a man who unknowingly kills his father and marries his mother, fulfilling a terrible prophecy despite all attempts to avoid it. When Oedipus discovers the truth, he blinds himself in horror. The play asks, are we responsible for our actions if fate has already determined them? But the Greeks also loved to laugh. Comedy flourished alongside tragedy. The playwright Aristophanes, writing in the late 5th century BCE, created wild, bawdy, satirical plays that mocked politicians, philosophers, and even the gods. His play Lysistrata tells of women who refuse to sleep with their husbands until men agree to end the Peloponnesian War, a comic fantasy with a serious anti-war message. Greek comedy was irreverent, full of puns and physical humor, reminding us that these ancient people enjoyed a good laugh as much as a good cry. Greek actors wore masks, large, stylized faces that helped audiences in the back rows see which character was which. A single actor might play multiple roles by changing masks. The masks also had another function. They amplified the voice, helping sound carry through the open-air theater. All actors were men, even for female roles, and the most famous actors became celebrities, traveling from city to city to perform. Let these ancient theaters fill your mind now. Imagine sitting on smooth stone seats, warm from the Mediterranean sun, the scent of pine trees drifting from the hillside, thousands of people breathing together, watching as masked figures enact stories of gods and mortals, fate and choice, tragedy and joy. Rest easy in this amphitheater of dreams. Let the ancient choruses sing you deeper into peaceful sleep. Let your mind drift now to quieter pursuits, to the realm of numbers, shapes, and the hidden patterns that the Greeks believed governed all existence. In the 6th century BCE, on the island of Samos in the eastern Aegean, a man named Pythagoras was born. He traveled widely, to Egypt, to Babylon, learning from the priests and wise men of other cultures. When he returned, he founded a community in southern Italy, part school and part religious brotherhood. The Pythagoreans, as his followers were called, believed that numbers were the fundamental reality of the universe. Everything could be understood through mathematics. They discovered that musical harmonies corresponded to simple numerical ratios. A string half the length produces a note 1 octave higher. If music followed mathematical laws, they reasoned perhaps everything did. Of course, you know the Pythagorean theorem. In a right triangle, the square of the hypotenuse equals the sum of the squares of the other two sides. But this was more than geometry to Pythagoras. It was proof that the cosmos itself was mathematical, orderly, beautiful. The Pythagoreans even believed that the planets and their orbits created a music of the spheres, a cosmic harmony too constant for human ears to notice, like someone who lives beside the ocean and no longer hears the waves. Mathematics and astronomy intertwined in Greek thought. Around 270 BCE, a mathematician named Aristarchus of Samos proposed something remarkable and heretical, that the Earth revolved around the sun, not the sun around the Earth. He even tried to calculate the relative distances and sizes of the sun and moon, though his heliocentric model was rejected. After all, if the Earth moved when we feel it, his ideas planted seeds that would flower nearly 2,000 years later in the work of Copernicus. Another brilliant mind, Eratosthenes, who lived around 276 to 194 BCE, calculated the circumference of the Earth with astonishing accuracy. He knew that in the Egyptian city of Syene, the sun shone directly down a well at noon on the summer solstice, meaning it was directly overhead. But in Alexandria, at the same moment, the sun cast a shadow at a measurable angle. Using the distance between the two cities and some elegant geometry, Eratosthenes calculated Earth's circumference to within about 2% of the actual value. All this more than 1,700 years before anyone sailed around the world. The greatest mathematical mind of antiquity was perhaps Archimedes of Syracuse, who lived from approximately 287 to 212 BCE. He calculated pi with remarkable precision, discovered principles of buoyancy and leverage, and invented machines of war, catapults, cranes, and supposedly even a system of mirrors to set enemy ships ablaze. When Roman soldiers besieged Syracuse during the Second Punic War, the elderly Archimedes was so absorbed in a mathematical problem drawn in the sand that he didn't notice a soldier approaching. "Don't disturb my circles," he reportedly said, and the soldier, insulted, killed him. With Archimedes died an era. Rome would conquer the Greek world, but it would never produce another mathematical genius of his caliber. Medicine, too, flowered in the Greek world. Hippocrates, born around 460 BCE on the island of Kos, is often called a father of medicine. Before him, illness was often attributed to divine punishment or demonic possession. Hippocrates taught that diseases had natural causes that could be studied and understood. He emphasized careful observation of symptoms, detailed record keeping, and the body's own ability to heal itself. The Hippocratic Oath, which doctors traditionally swear to uphold ethical standards, comes from this tradition, though the version used today has been modified over centuries. The Greeks also pioneered historical writing as we know it. Herodotus, born around 484 BC, is called the father of history. He traveled extensively throughout the Mediterranean and Near East, collecting stories, investigating customs, and recording what he learned. His histories, focused on the Persian Wars, is filled with digressions about Egyptian crocodiles, Scythian burial practices, and Babylonian marriage customs. Not everything he reported was accurate. He sometimes repeated tall tales, but his curiosity and his attempt to verify information and explain causes make him recognizably a historian in the modern sense. Following Herodotus came Thucydides, who wrote about the Peloponnesian War in which he himself fought. Born around 460 BC, Thucydides was more rigorous and skeptical than Herodotus. He excluded divine intervention from his explanations, focused on political and military causes, and tried to establish facts through eyewitness testimony and careful reasoning. His history of the Peloponnesian War remains a masterpiece of historical analysis, studied to this day in military academies and universities worldwide. These Greek thinkers, mathematicians, doctors, historians, shared a common conviction that the world could be understood through reason and observation. The universe wasn't merely capricious, governed only by the whims of gods. It followed patterns. It made sense, and human beings, using their minds carefully and systematically, could grasp those patterns and make sense of their world. Let these ideas settle over you like a gentle blanket. The harmony of numbers, the careful observation of nature, the attempt to understand rather than simply to accept, breathe slowly, in and out, as regular as the geometric perfection of a circle, as predictable as the stars wheeling overhead in their ancient courses. Let us turn now to the everyday rhythms of Greek life, to homes and families, markets and meals, the simple human moments that fill the days between battles and philosophies. The typical Greek house was modest and inward-looking. From the street, you might see only a plain wall with a single door. But step inside, and you find rooms arranged around a central courtyard open to the sky. This was where the family gathered, where women worked at their looms, where children played in the shade. The courtyard caught rainwater in the system below, precious in the dry Mediterranean summers. Most homes had just a few rooms, a kitchen with clay oven, a dining room called the andron where men entertained guests, and small bedrooms. Furnishings were simple. Wooden chairs and couches, chests for storage, oil lamps for light. Greek clothing was equally simple, yet elegant in its draping. Men and women both wore the chiton, a tunic made from a rectangular piece of fabric fastened at the shoulders and belted at the waist. Women's chitons reached to their ankles, while men's often stopped at the knee. Over this, one might wear a himation, a cloak draped over one shoulder. The fabric was usually wool or linen, undyed for everyday wear, though the wealthy might afford garments dyed in expensive colors like purple from sea snails. There were no buttons or zippers, no tailoring, just fabric, pins, and the art of draping. Food centered on what the Greeks called the Mediterranean triad: grain, grapes, and olives. Bread was a staple, baked fresh daily, made from barley for the poor or wheat for those who could afford it. Olives were eaten at every meal or pressed for their oil, which was used for cooking, lighting lamps, and anointing the body. Wine was drunk mixed with water. Drinking it undiluted was considered barbaric. The Greeks ate fish more than meat, which was expensive and usually reserved for religious festivals when animals were sacrificed to the gods and their meat shared among worshippers. Women's lives in ancient Greece were restricted compared to men's. In Athens especially, respectable women spent most of their time indoors, managing a household, weaving cloth, and raising children. They couldn't vote, couldn't own property in their own names, couldn't appear in court. A woman was always under the legal guardianship of a man, her father before marriage, her husband after, her son if widowed. Yet within the home, the wife held considerable authority, managing slaves, controlling the household budget, and making daily decisions that kept the family functioning. In Sparta, however, women lived quite differently. Spartan girls, like boys, received physical training. They exercised, ran races, and threw the javelin, while their husbands lived in military barracks. Until age 30, Spartan women managed estates and property. They were known throughout Greece for speaking their minds freely, and other Greeks considered them shockingly bold. When a foreign woman asked a Spartan woman why Spartan women were the only ones who could rule men, she replied simply, "Because we're the only ones who give birth to men." Slavery was fundamental to the Greek economy. Slaves might be prisoners of war, children of slaves, or people sold into slavery by pirates or debt. Some worked in silver mines under brutal conditions. Others served as household servants, teachers, or skilled craftspeople. In Athens, many slaves worked alongside free men and even earned wages, though these belonged to their masters. A fortunate slave might eventually purchase freedom. The philosopher Aristotle, despite his brilliance, considered slavery natural. Some people, he argued, were naturally suited to be ruled. It's a reminder that even great civilizations harbor profound injustices. Greek children had toys much like children today: dolls, rattles, yo-yos, and spinning tops. They played games with knuckle bones, the ancient equivalent of dice. Boys and girls played together when young, but around age 7 their paths diverged. Boys from wealthy families went to school learning to read and write, studying Homer, playing the lyre, and exercising in the gymnasium. Girls, with rare exceptions, stayed home learning household skills from their mothers. Education was not compulsory or universal. It was a privilege of wealth and gender. The Greeks loved athletic competitions beyond the Olympics. Every major city held games, and athletes traveled from festival to festival competing for glory. Events included running races at various distances: long jump, discus throw, javelin throw, wrestling, and boxing, which was brutal, with no rounds or weight classes, continuing until one fighter gave up or was knocked unconscious. The Pancration combined wrestling and boxing with almost no rules. Only biting and eye gouging were forbidden. Winners received not money but crowns of olive, laurel, or celery, yet the honor they gained could secure their fortune for life. Let your mind rest now in this ancient world. Imagine the quiet courtyard where afternoon light slants through columns. Smell the olive oil and clay lamps burning softly. Hear the distant voices from the agora fading as evening comes. Breathe in the simplicity of daily life. Breathe out the passage of thousands of years. Let yourself sink deeper into this peaceful Mediterranean twilight. As you drift deeper into rest, let us explore the Greek relationship with the divine, the rituals and mysteries that connected mortals to the realm of the gods. Religion permeated every aspect of Greek life, yet it looked nothing like modern organized religion. There was no sacred book, no central authority, no required creed to believe. Instead, religion meant performing the proper rituals at the proper times. Before eating, you poured a libation of wine to the gods. Before voyage, you sacrificed to Poseidon. Before battle, you consulted omens in the flight of birds or the entrails of animals. The gods didn't particularly care what you believe in your heart. They cared that you honored them with sacrifices, festivals, and temples. The most sacred site in all of Greece was Delphi, perched high on the slopes of Mount Parnassus. Here stood the temple of Apollo, and within it sat the Pythia, the oracle who channeled the gods' prophecies. Kings and commoners alike made the pilgrimage to Delphi to ask questions of the oracle. The Pythia, always a woman over 50 years old, would enter a trance, perhaps induced by vapors rising from a chasm beneath the temple. Those scholars debate this and speak Apollo's cryptic answers. Her prophecies were famously ambiguous. When King Croesus of Lydia asked if he should attack Persia, the oracle replied that if he did, a great empire would fall. He attacked, and indeed a great empire fell, his own. Mystery religions offered something different from the public rituals. Secret ceremonies promising initiates special knowledge and a blessed afterlife. The Eleusinian Mysteries, celebrated annually at Eleusis near Athens for nearly 2,000 years, were the most famous. Initiates underwent secret rituals connected to Demeter, goddess of grain, and her daughter Persephone, who spent half the year in the underworld. What exactly happened in these ceremonies was never revealed. Initiates swore oaths of secrecy, so sacred that to this day, we still don't know the details. But thousands sought initiation. suggesting the experience was profoundly meaningful. Death and the afterlife occupied Greek imagination deeply. Most Greeks believed in an underworld ruled by Hades, where souls of the dead dwelt as pale shadows of their former selves, neither happy nor tortured, simply existing in a twilight realm. To reach the underworld, souls had to cross the river Styx, paying the ferryman Charon with a coin placed in the mouth of the deceased at burial. Without this coin, the soul would wander the riverbank for 100 years. Only exceptional heroes might reach the Elysian fields, a paradise of eternal peace, while the truly wicked suffered in Tartarus, a pit of endless torment. Greek funerary practices reflected these beliefs. The body was washed, anointed with oil, dressed in white, and laid out a home for mourning. Women, especially, were expected to wail and tear their hair in grief, so much so that Athens eventually passed laws limiting the extravagance of funeral displays. The body was then either buried or cremated. Grave markers ranged from simple stone slabs to elaborate sculptures. The dead were believed to thirst, so libations of water, wine, and honey were regularly poured at grave sites. Festivals marked the Greek calendar, giving rhythm to the year. In Athens, the Panathenea celebrated Athena's birthday every year, with a grand procession every 4th year. Citizens would carry a newly woven peplos, a sacred robe, up to the Parthenon to dress the ancient wooden statue of Athena housed inside. There were athletic competitions, musical contests, and recitations of Homer. The entire city participated, reinforcing shared identity and devotion to their patron goddess. The rural Dionysia in winter honored Dionysus with processions, songs, and revelry in villages throughout Attica. Participants would carry wooden phalluses in the procession. Dionysus was a god of fertility as well as wine, and performed bawdy songs. This uninhibited celebration stood in stark contrast to the dignity of other festivals, reminding us that Greek religion embraced both the ordered and the ecstatic, the solemn and the wild. Each city had its own sacred calendar, its own patron gods, its own festivals. In Sparta, the Hyacinthia celebrated the beautiful youth Hyacinthus, beloved of Apollo, who died tragically and was transformed into a flower. The festival lasted 3 days, beginning with mourning and ending with joyful celebration, including music, dancing, and feasting. These local traditions created distinct civic identities. To be Athenian or Spartan or Theban meant participating in specific sacred rhythms unique to your city. Religion, then, was woven into the fabric of Greek life, not separate from daily existence, but integral to it. Every meal, every journey, every important decision involved the gods. The divine was everywhere, in springs and groves, in the flight of eagles, in the beauty of a sunset. The boundary between sacred and secular was porous, permeable. To be Greek was to live in constant awareness of powers greater than yourself, to honor them, to seek their favor, and to accept your place in a cosmos vast and mysterious. Rest now in this ancient world of ritual and reverence. Imagine the smoke of sacrifice rising into clear blue sky. Hear the hymn sung to Apollo at dawn. Feel the sacred peace of a temple courtyard at evening. Breathe deeply. Let the ancient prayers murmur in languages long silent. Drift on the river between waking and dreams. Let your thoughts turn now to the beauty the Greeks created, to sculpture and pottery, to the art that still takes our breath away thousands of years after the hands that shaped it turned to dust. Greek sculpture evolved dramatically over the centuries. In the Archaic period, around the 7th and 6th centuries BCE, sculptors created cool raw statues. Young men standing rigidly, 1 foot forward, arms at their sides, wearing the archaic smile, a mysterious expression that seems both serene and enigmatic. These figures were stylized, symmetrical, formal. They served as grave markers or offerings to gods, representing an idealized human form rather than any specific individual. Then came the classical period, and everything changed. Sculptors learned to capture movement, weight, emotion. Around 450 BCE, a sculptor named Polykleitos created the Dorophoros, or spear bearer, which embodied his theory of ideal proportions. He wrote a treatise called the Canon, now lost, explaining the mathematical ratios that produce perfect beauty. The statue shows a young athlete resting his weight on one leg, the other relaxed, a pose called contrapposto that creates a natural, living quality. For the first time, stone seemed to breathe. Phidias, the master sculptor who oversaw the Parthenon decorations, created works of such magnificence that they were considered wonders of the ancient world. His statue of Zeus at Olympia stood over 40 feet tall, made of ivory and gold plates over a wooden frame. Zeus sat on a throne decorated with precious stones, holding a statue of Nike, goddess of victory, in one hand and a scepter in the other. The statue was so impressive that it was said you couldn't see it without feeling you had truly been in the presence of a god. Sadly, this masterpiece was destroyed centuries ago, lost to fire and time. Later, in the Hellenistic period after Alexander's conquests, sculpture became even more dramatic and emotional. The Nike of Samothrace, created around 200 BCE, shows the winged goddess of victory landing on a ship's prow, her garments whipped by invisible wind, every fold of fabric suggesting motion and energy. The Laocoon group, carved around the 1st century BCE, depicts the Trojan priest and his sons being strangled by sea serpents, their faces contorted in agony, muscles straining against the coils. This was art that sought to move the viewer, to provoke powerful emotions. Greek pottery tells its own story. Early geometric pottery from around 900 to 700 BC featured abstract patterns, zigzags, triangles, meanders. Then came the black figure technique, developed in Corinth around 700 BCE and perfected in Athens. Artists painted figures in glossy black slip on the red clay, then incised details with sharp tools. These vases show scenes from mythology, daily life, athletics, and warfare, visual stories wrapped around functional objects. Around 530 BCE, Athenian potters invented the red figure technique, which reversed the color scheme. Now the background was painted black, leaving figures in the natural red of the clay, with details painted rather than incised. This allowed for much greater subtlety and realism. Artists could show three-quarter views, foreshortening, elaborate drapery, and complex expressions. These weren't just containers for wine or oil. They were canvases for miniature masterpieces. Architecture reached its zenith in the classical period. Greek temples followed precise mathematical proportions and three main styles, or orders. The Doric order was sturdy and simple, with plain capitals atop fluted columns. Think of the Parthenon. The Ionic order was more slender and elegant, with capitals featuring spiral scrolls called volutes. The Corinthian order, developed later, featured ornate capitals decorated with acanthus leaves. These orders weren't merely decorative. They embodied philosophical ideas about harmony, proportion, and beauty. Greek architects understood that straight lines can appear curved to the human eye, so they built subtle curves into their straight lines. The Parthenon's foundation rises slightly in the center. Its columns lean imperceptibly inward and bulge slightly in the middle, a refinement called entasis, to counteract the optical illusion that would otherwise make them appear concave. The corner columns are slightly thicker and closer together. Every dimension was calculated to create visual perfection. What looks effortlessly harmonious is actually the result of extraordinary mathematical precision. The Greeks also pioneered architectural sculpture, integrating relief carvings into the very structure of buildings. The Parthenon's pediments, the triangular spaces at each end, contained huge sculptural scenes. The birth of Athena on one side, her contest with Poseidon for patronage of Athens on the other. A frieze ran around the entire building, showing the Panathenaic procession. These weren't separate artworks placed on a building. They were conceived as integral to the architecture itself, sculpture and structure united in a single aesthetic vision. Let your mind rest now among these ancient masterpieces. Picture the white marble glowing in Mediterranean sunlight. See the painted pottery with its elegant figures. Feel the perfect proportions of temple columns rising toward a brilliant sky. Breathe in beauty, breathe out time. Let the harmony of classical art cradle you in peaceful stillness. As you sink deeper into tranquil rest, let's explore the Greek world beyond Greece itself. The colonies that spread their culture across the Mediterranean like seeds scattered on the wind. Beginning in the 8th century BCE, Greeks left their homeland in waves, establishing new cities on distant shores. These weren't conquests or military invasions. They were migrations of families seeking new opportunities, fleeing overpopulation, escaping political turmoil, or pursuing trade. They sailed west of Sicily and southern Italy, establishing so many colonies there that the region became known as Magna Graecia, Greater Greece. They sailed east to the coast of Asia Minor, north to the Black Sea, south to North Africa. Wherever Greeks settled, they brought their language, their gods, their customs. Syracuse in Sicily, founded by colonists from Corinth around 734 BC, became one of the most powerful Greek cities anywhere, eventually rivaling Athens itself in wealth and influence. The Greek colonies in southern Italy, cities like Tarentum, Croton, and Thurii, produced some of the ancient world's greatest minds. Pythagoras established his famous school in Croton. The philosopher Parmenides lived in Elea. These colonial cities weren't backwaters, but vibrant centers of culture and learning. Massalia, modern Marseille in southern France, was founded by Greeks from Phocaea around 600 BCE. It became a gateway between the Greek world and the Celtic peoples of Gaul. Greek traders sailing through Massalia introduced wine and olive cultivation to regions that had never known them. Greek alphabets influenced the development of writing systems among peoples from Spain to the Black Sea. Through trade and contact, Greek culture seeped into societies that never became Greek themselves. The colonies maintained ties with their mother cities, their metropolis, as they called them, but were independent polis in their own right. A colony might honor its metropolis with religious dedications or turn to it for advice in disputes, but politically they were separate. This created a vast network of Greek cities sharing culture and language, but politically fragmented, never unified into a single empire during the classical period. The Greeks were a people without a nation, bound by culture rather than borders. Greek coins tell the story of this widespread world. Each city minted its own coins, stamped with distinctive symbols. An owl for Athens, a turtle for Aegina, a winged horse for Corinth, a rose for Rhodes. Coinage itself was a Greek innovation, first appearing in Lydia and Asia Minor around 600 BC and quickly adopted throughout the Greek world. These coins weren't just currency. They were miniature works of art and proclamations of civic pride, circulating far beyond the cities that made them. The Greek language, too, spread far and wide, though it evolved into different dialects. Attic Greek, spoken in Athens, became the basis for Koine Greek, the common Greek that spread across Alexander's empire and remained the lingua franca of the Eastern Mediterranean for centuries. The New Testament would eventually be written in Koine Greek. To speak Greek was to participate in a shared cultural world, regardless of where you lived. Greek mercenaries served in armies across the ancient world. When the Persian prince Cyrus the Younger attempted to seize his brother's throne around 401 BCE, he hired 10,000 Greek hoplites to join his army. After Cyrus was killed in battle deep in Mesopotamia, these Greeks found themselves stranded in hostile territory, thousands of miles from home. Their incredible march back to the Greek world, fighting their way through enemy territory, was recorded by Xenophon in his Anabasis, the March Up Country. It remains one of history's greatest adventure stories, and a testament to the discipline and resilience of Greek warriors. Trade networks connected the Greek world with civilizations far beyond. Greek merchants sailed to Egypt, trading olive oil and wine for grain, papyrus, and exotic goods from even farther south. They voyaged to the Black Sea for fish and grain. They traded with Phoenicians, Carthaginians, Etruscans, and Celts. Greek pottery has been found in burial mounds on the Asian steppes, evidence of trade routes stretching impossibly far. The Greeks were a maritime people, and the sea was their highway to the world. Yet for all their travels and colonies, Greeks always maintained a sense of being distinct from barbarians, their term for anyone who didn't speak Greek. The word barbarian itself comes from the Greek barbaros, meaning someone who speaks an unintelligible language that sounds like bar to Greek ears. This wasn't always a term of contempt. The Greeks respected Persian civilization, for instance, but it marked a clear boundary. To be Greek meant to speak Greek, worship Greek gods, value Greek ideals. It was a cultural identity that could exist anywhere, independent of geography. Let these far-flung colonies drift through your mind now. Imagine Greek ships with painted eyes on their prows sailing across wine-dark seas. Picture new cities rising on foreign shores, yet unmistakably Greek with their temples and agoras. Hear the Greek language spoken in 1,000 accents across 1,000 miles. Breathe in the salt air of ancient voyages. Breathe out the distance between then and now. Let yourself float on the Mediterranean currents of trade and culture. As we approach the end of our journey through ancient Greece, let's reflect on the twilight of this remarkable civilization and a legacy that would never truly fade. After Alexander's death in 323 BCE, his vast empire fractured into several kingdoms ruled by his generals and their descendants. The Ptolemies took Egypt, making Alexandria their glittering capital with its famous lighthouse and library. The Seleucids controlled much of the Near East and Persia. The Antigonids ruled Macedon and parts of Greece. These Hellenistic kingdoms blended Greek and local cultures, creating a cosmopolitan world where a Greek-speaking Egyptian might worship both Zeus and Serapis, a fusion deity combining Greek and Egyptian elements. The Library of Alexandria, founded around 300 BCE under Ptolemy I, became the greatest repository of knowledge in the ancient world. Scholars estimate it held anywhere from 400,000 to 700,000 scrolls at its height. Scribes copied texts. Scholars translated works from other languages into Greek, and thinkers from across the Mediterranean came to study. It was here that the Hebrew Bible was first translated into Greek, creating the Septuagint. The library's destruction, probably through multiple fires over several centuries rather than one dramatic burning, was an incalculable loss to human knowledge. Meanwhile, a new power was rising in Italy. Rome began as a small city-state, but grew through military conquest and political brilliance. In 146 BCE, Rome finally defeated and destroyed Corinth, effectively ending Greek independence. Yet in a profound sense, Greece conquered its conquerors. Roman generals brought Greek statues home as war trophies. Roman aristocrats hired Greek tutors for their children. Roman poets studied Greek literature. The Roman poet Horace wrote, "Captive Greece took captive her savage conqueror. Rome ruled the Greek world politically, but Greek culture ruled the Roman mind. Greek philosophy profoundly influenced Roman thought. Stoicism, founded by Zeno of Citium around 300 BCE, taught that virtue lay in accepting fate with equanimity, focusing on what we can control, our own thoughts and actions, rather than what we cannot. This philosophy appealed deeply to Romans, and Stoic ideas would influence everyone from Roman emperors like Marcus Aurelius to early Christian theologians. The Stoics believed in a rational, ordered universe and in humanity's fundamental equality, revolutionary ideas that would echo through the centuries. Epicureanism, founded by Epicurus around the same time, taught a different path. Epicurus argued that the goal of life was pleasure, but he meant something subtle. Not wild indulgence, but the absence of pain and anxiety, achieved through simple living, friendship, and philosophical contemplation. His garden in Athens became a haven for followers who sought peace of mind. Though later misunderstood as promoting hedonism, Epicurus actually advocated a quiet, modest life free from fears, especially fear of death and divine punishment, that torment so many. Greek continued as a language of learning and culture in the Eastern Roman Empire. When Rome split into Western and Eastern halves, the eastern portion, which we call the Byzantine Empire, preserved Greek language and learning for another 1,000 years. Constantinople, the New Rome, was a Greek-speaking city where Platonic philosophy, Aristotelian logic, and Christian theology merged into new syntheses. Byzantine scholars preserved and copied ancient Greek texts that otherwise would have vanished entirely. When Constantinople finally fell to the Ottoman Turks in 1453, Byzantine scholars fled westward, carrying manuscripts with them. These refugees helped spark the Italian Renaissance. Suddenly, Western Europe rediscovered Greek texts that had been lost or known only through Arabic translations. The works of Plato, the plays of Sophocles, the histories of Herodotus, all became available again. This rediscovery helped transform European thought, contributing to everything from the scientific revolution to modern democracy. The Greek legacy surrounds us still. Democracy, philosophy, theater, the Olympics. So many English words derive from Greek roots, all testify to their enduring influence. Mathematics, medicine, history, and countless other fields still build on foundations the Greeks established. When we debate ethics, we echo Socrates. When we study geometry, we follow Euclid. When we attend a play, we participate in an art form the Greeks invented. The civilization that flourished on the shores of the Aegean thousands of years ago never truly ended. It transformed, adapted, and wove itself into the fabric of Western civilization and beyond. And so our journey draws to a close. We have wandered through 3,000 years, from the palace of Knossos to the fall of Constantinople, from Homer's songs to Byzantine scholars. We have walked with philosophers and warriors, poets and mathematicians, citizens and slaves. We have watched democracy dawn, empires rise and fall, and ideas that would outlive stone and bronze. Rest now in the knowledge that these ancient voices still whisper across the centuries, that the columns of the Parthenon still stand beneath Greek skies, that the words of Sophocles and Sappho still move human hearts, that the questions Socrates asked in the Agora of Athens are questions we still ask today. Let the weight of history become weightless. Let 3 millennia dissolve into this single, peaceful moment. Let yourself drift on the gentle currents of time, knowing that civilizations rise and fall, but beauty, truth, and wisdom endure. Breathe deeply, rest peacefully, sleep soundly, for you have traveled far, through ages of wonder, and earned your rest in the timeless embrace of history.